Welcome everyone. I suppose give you the opening of this from the London Magazine perspective. It's been a great pleasure to publish another collection of Maggie's work. As a prose writer myself and a poet, I have to say that Maggie does everything better than me, including colour coordination. Maggie's work is. She plays along the strings of language really in an amazing fashion. This is true poetry because she mixes the banal, the everyday, with the metaphysical and with the elegance and refinement of language that only true poets are able to do. It's an object, an artifact of great refinement. And I'm looking forward to publishing the next collection in a couple of years. It's a great credit to the London Magazine. We are the better for it, and I'm looking forward to this reading to give life to these and to lift them from the page. So, Maggie,
thank you so much, Stephen. As all the poets here will know, it is a huge honour to get one poem in the London Magazine. To have a second collection published by them is quite astonishing to me, really. But since this is happening, I have to believe that this has happened. I would like to, first of all, welcome all of you who've come as audience, and thank you very much for giving up an hour of your evening to listen to what I hope will be poems you'll enjoy. I'd also like to welcome my special guests this evening. When I was thinking about this event, I thought I would like to include some other people. I particularly wanted to include Mary Behrens, whose artworks were the inspiration for all the poems in the first section of the book. So welcome to you from Maine, Mary. And also I thought, I know a lot of poets who've had books published during the pandemic and haven't been able to have readings. So I thought it might be nice to invite three of them along to read one of my poems and one from one of their books that have been published during the pandemic. So big welcome to Holly and Jacqueline and Anne, who I will introduce to you better in a minute. Some of you I know have got copies of the book already, and thank you very much for buying it. That's much appreciated. But the book is divided into three sections. The first of these is based on the fantastic artworks of Mary Behrens, which engage with the refugee crisis. The second part of this is about other things in the world that make me furious or despairing, things, particularly the climate crisis. And the third part of it is about joy, really. It's about the things that make life worth living. It's about the things that are wonderful about being alive. So it moves across those three areas, and we will be traveling those three in the next hour or so. First of all, I would like to introduce Mary Behrens to you. Mary is an artist, visual artist, who travels between Canada and the United States. She's Canadian by birth, but studied art in Massachusetts and Vermont. She has been an art lecturer in many places, as well as an artist, and is currently a visiting guest artist at the Ottawa School of Art. And I met her when she came to London, and part of what she wanted to do in London was find out more about her grandfather, who had been a German who had been interred at Alexandra Palace in London. And she came across my book called Ali Pali Prison Camp. I don't know how. Oh, look, she's got it with her. And she then emailed me out of the blue and said, could we meet up at Alexandra Palace? And I said, sure, why not? And we went, and we immediately hit it off. And then I can remember being in the cafe, but the one by the boating lake at the back of Ali Pali. And Mary starting to tell me about the work that she was working on at that point, which was a series of artworks which she calls Run, which were about the refugee crisis. And I had been wanting to write about the refugee experience for many years and not found a way into it. Everything I wrote was rubbish. But Mary very kindly sent me her artworks, and I then found a way into writing about this. Mary, would you like to say something before we show a little 1 minute movie about your Run exhibition?
Well, thank you so much, Maggie, for having me. I'm just delighted to be here. And I will just add to your story about meeting you. You were so kind to meet me because I was a complete stranger. You were less of a stranger to me because I'd been stalking you online for a few weeks. And you know, you're right to say that when we met, we just really hit it off. But you were a wonderful guide that morning at Ali Pali, and it was just such a moving visit for me because I'd never been there. I'd never been to where my grandfather had spent 4 years of his life during the First World War. And so it was a deeply moving visit. And I'm just so glad that we now have this transatlantic friendship. Run is a series of images depicting some form of refugee flight. They are reassembled photos sourced from the internet, history books, and other media. Technically, they are laser prints on bond paper. The images are recreated by enlargement, fragmentation, and distortion, then reassembled in a grid, and finally wrapped in plastic bandages, which gives them a reflective, shiny surface. Each piece is approximately 22 by 34 inches. They are displayed frameless and are suspended 3 inches from the wall by invisible tabs, creating the illusion of floating, unsupported photographs. With this series, I'm interested in making work which, through its raw materiality, conveys the ragged and terrifying condition of refugee flight. However intangible these experiences of human flight are for me, the series is an attempt at empathy with the plight of families and citizens who were on the run from some trauma beyond their control.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Mary?
No, not at all. Just to say that the work is generally 3 feet by 2 feet high in terms of scale. But that's about it for now.
Thank you. And to me, it was the most incredible inspiration. So the first poem from Everlove that I'm going to read is on page 9, and it's a poem called Torn, which is both about the refugee experience and also about Mary's artwork form. Now you've seen that, you might understand how that works. Torn. Someone took your life, and tore it down the middle, then crossways into smaller pieces, as if it were a letter from an unfaithful lover, pieces flying to the wind. So now you know that the gods, the fates, the gods care less for you than a scrap of paper, And though you run about and catch them all blowing and raining about you like ticker tape, you can't see how you could begin to stick them together to make a life again. So you tuck them carefully into your pocket and walk. And now I think Mary is going to read another of the poems from this section of the book.
Yes, I am. I'm really happy to read a poem from your Torn collection and from your Torn section. And the poem I've chosen is titled Flight. And I just want to say there are a couple of reasons I picked this particular poem, because it was really a difficult decision. This poem, it seems to be in sync with one of my images called Boat. But more importantly, it's a poem I found really beautiful and very sad. And just to set it up for those of you who haven't read it, it's on page 23. And it's in the voice of a mother who is sending off her child to a foreign land, presumably a safer country. And so that's the subject of the poem. And it's a very beautiful poem. Flight. When your mother kissed you goodbye, her fear took many shapes. A knife in the grip of a frightened boy, the greed of a desperate man, the open grave of never seeing you again, never knowing your fate. She told herself that you would always be polite and charm the strangers, find a way to let her know your future, which shore might welcome you, even if your old home was washed away and she was far adrift. She knew there would be seas to cross, but told herself you could swim, remembered your small feet drumming inside her, how she breathed for you. She never imagined, sorry, all of a sudden I can't, sorry, excuse me. She never imagined that you would launch yourself through the air from one ship to another, like a trapeze artist, flinging your body out into the sky. No safety net or practiced hands ready to catch and grip. No crowd below to gasp. She couldn't teach you how to fly.
Thank you, Mary, for that lovely reading, and for the artworks that you've produced. Thank you too to the unknown photographer who took that image and the other images that you have presented to us so thoughtfully and so beautifully. The poem that Mary has just read, of course, is partly about parenting, and putting together an event like this makes you think very much of the people who can't be with you at it. And so the next poem that I would like to introduce to you is a poem about my parents who can't be with us, and an opportunity to say thank you to them. Thank you to them for introducing me to words, introducing me to a love of poetry, and many, many other things. So this is a thank you to Joan and Alfred Brookes. Now I must be both mother and father to myself, scatter wisdom over my own head like an upturned bowl of rose petals, name myself with sprinkled water, offer pie and mash advice, pour out cold, clean glassfuls of forgiveness, remember to love myself, pride puff at my small achievements, love most fiercely my flocks of imperfections. If only I could have found that red bow for tonight, I'd have worn it, I think. Next, I would like to introduce Holly to you. Holly, would you like to just say hello?
Hi, everyone.
I met Holly through the National Association of Writers in Education when I was chair and she was on the higher education committee, and we sat through many boring meetings together. Like me, she has a PhD in creative writing from Cardiff University, and as well as currently lecturing at Liverpool John Moores University, she writes fiction of all conceivable lengths, specialising in both microfiction and novels, novellas. She writes non-fiction, she writes poetry. And the Hall, Exhibit A, is her debut collection published by the London magazine. So lots and lots of connections between us, Holly. Holly has also been amazing to me in offering advice on my collection. So huge thank you to you for that, Holly. So let me tell you about the Hall. And then Holly is going to read one poem of mine from Everlove and one from the Hall. Step into the mysterious old hall, alive with ghosts, owls, hornets, and mice. Meet a solitary child who wanders in and out of the present. Feel how thin the membranes are between inside, outside, now and then, where everything is as close as the air you breathe. And she is actually reading from that mysterious old hall somewhere in North Wales. Thank you. Over to you, Holly.
Thank you so much, Maggie. And I think firstly, before I say anything else, just thank you so much for inviting me to speak. As Maggie said, we've worked together in lots of different ways, but Maggie was absolutely instrumental in helping me put my collection together, and I couldn't have done it without you, Maggie. So thank you so much. So the first poem that I'm going to read from Everlove, if you want to follow along, is called Witch, and that's on page 37 if you have a copy to hand. I picked this, I mean, I could have picked any poem in the collection and read it with great joy, but this one I think really captures my heart, which is kind of full of interest in hauntings and ghosts and kind of strange supernatural things. So this is Witch. A witch was bottled and stoppered with wax in this ribbed and silvered scent bottle. The handwritten ticket does not explain how she was captured, but says an old lady warned, if you let her out, there'll be a pack of trouble. Now cramped in this wasted glass for more than a century, trouble a brewing, her anger has matured, grown both expansive and precise. If she escaped, her wrath would tempest through this tiptoed museum, displays of apple corers, wart cures, moles 4 feet would spin and shatter, whirl in a typhoon. She would howl like winds from the lands which offered up the reindeer skin knickers and raincoats of seal intestine embroidered with caribou hair, trash their hard-won, unexpected beauty. A small girl asks her father if it's true, says she thinks the bottle is too small to hold a real witch. He hurries her past the shrunken heads, murdered toddlers' skulls, tiny silken Chinese shoes to hide the mutilated, putrefying feet of other daughters, and doesn't say furies roam the world, screeching through the night, twisting men to unspeakable acts, and how little he could do if the witch began to twist the fire sticks in their sockets till the whole world was ablaze with tongues of rage. I get so much joy from that. As you can probably tell, I could hold on to every word. So I'm going to read a poem from my collection as well. And you'll probably notice, those of you who've been scouting out everyone's backgrounds, and I know that we all do it on Zoom, so you can't pretend that you haven't been, will see that I have a kind of dark magic trick where I can do this. My cover, my cover. So it's kind of like the strangest form of subliminal advertising. So the hall, as Maggie said, is kind of about where I live. But one of the things that prompted quite a lot of the poems in this collection were the things that I found when I was kind of wandering around the house in and outside. And sometimes, you know, even the kind of most horrible thing you find discarded in a park or, you know, fallen on the street can be almost like a message to you to ask something that you didn't know you wanted answered. And this poem is about one of those things. This is called Trace. She was gone some time before I found it, screwed up and balled behind a chest of drawers. I cried out, pulled away when I touched it, thinking it an animal that had long since died. It wasn't damp, didn't have a smell, but it resisted my fingertips. I took it by the neck, shook it out to discover mottled patterns of navy, short sleeves, a now dead brand sized at 16. I wanted to try it on, twirl myself into someone else's shape, find out how it feels to zip my body into another woman's velvet. Wondered, could I become her by this one small change? Could I step through the mirror and come out alive? Thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic, Holly. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for all your help, and thank you for being here tonight. It's lovely to hear that poem and to hear my poem read by you as well. That's rather an amazing thing. I'm now going to read another poem of my own before I introduce Anne Caldwell to you. This is a poem which is kind of about this time of year and weather, but also about climate change and what on earth is going on. And this is written in the voice of the month of March, who turns out to be an extremely obnoxious 8-year-old boy. March. Ha ha, yada ya, hoiking up the heater in till all your little froggies start gripping and slithering, broiling up a pond storm, spewing out frog spawn, and all your soppy, silly buds simpering curtsy like la 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 daffy down dillies, and all the stupid sheepies bleating while birthing, sloppering out their mewling lambikins on the grassy green, and all the never learned peeps, optimisted, hope blinkered, cheerful and head soft, let little chitterlings disvest, unglove, cast clout, slip scarf, saying, in like a lion, out like a lamb, and me snickering, aha, this'll learn you. Temp drop, ice nose, sleet slash, hail hurt, flake fall, freeze ball, snowstorming, blizzarding, hiding up the lambikins and the daffodillies, spring clean, start fresh, white bright. And as someone who has been putting the seedlings out in the morning and bringing them in at night just in case the frost is coming, I know that nasty little creature is still around somewhere. It's now my huge pleasure to introduce Anne Caldwell. Anne and I also go back a long way, also met through Norway. Anne, can you say hello and wave?
Hello, hi.
Thank you. Anne and I were trying to figure out today how long ago it was that we met in Norway. I think it was about 1990 I joined it. She thinks not long after. So we go back quite a long way. And Anne, I have to tell you, is one of, if not the foremost expert in the country on the prose poem. And to prove it, she's got a PhD in the prose poem and has published many prose poems. She teaches at the OU and is just about to start a Royal Literary Fund Fellowship. So we have that in common as well. Alice in the North, Exhibit B, Exhibit 2, is an absolutely fantastic collection. It's her 4th collection. It's prose poems. It says on the back, Alice in the North is a sequence of prose poems that form a love song to the North. Its post-industrial landscapes, wild uplands, obsession with weather, seasonal change, and awkwardness. And I absolutely love it and recommend that you find it. Anne is going to read one of the poems from Everlove, and I'm interested to hear this in your voice, Anne, and a poem from Alice in the North. So over to you, Anne.
Thank you very much, Maggie. I chose Batting Partnership 34 Not Out. My dad was a great cricketer And this was the soundtrack to my childhood. So this poem really spoke to me, and I loved its sort of gentleness and dark, sinister undertones. And yeah, Maggie, you're just brilliant at doing many, many different things within one poem. Okay. Batting Partnership 34 Not Out, and we're on page 62 if you're following from the book. I'm wearing earplugs on my sun lounger because the test match is blaring from your laptop while I'm trying to read poetry, and both of us insist on our right to the garden because it's the summer, and though you'd be happy to wear earphones if I asked, I still have to listen to your schoolboy cheers or furious protestations to the umpire. So now, unplugged, the world sounds underwater, like lying right back in the bath where I can hear my own breathing and faint cricketing applause drifting from a far-off country or another era. And when they stop for tea, you consult me about the pruning, and I swim up mermaid-like, ready to exchange my voice for a dance or a kiss. And I'd like to read you a poem which prickled my ears with tears, or the one about cricket, which you just might catch. But Joe Root has just made 250. So you run back to the pitch and I dive into the pages and hope this muffled afternoon is the first of a long hot summer where we can keep recrossing on the wicket and not a warning of the featherbed silence which will fall when the ground is cleared at the close of play.
Thank you so much, Anne.
Poem, Maggie.
Thank you. And those of you who are cricket fans can probably date that by the Joe Root making 250. Those of you who are in my family and know that we are coming up for our 39th anniversary will know that it's a few years old as well. And now you're going to read one of yours, Anne.
Yes, I'm going to read a poem called True North from my collection, Alison and the North. And thanks, Maggie, for introducing the book so beautifully and for me to be in such great company tonight with everyone here. True North. Out on the boat's bridge, Alice and her companion sit and watch the sunset, stare into that globe of light, half swallowed by water as the sky blooms pink, then drains of colour. His white shirt glows. Alice knows his shoulders are sunburnt and tomorrow his skin will blister and peel. He radiates heat, smells of sweat with his rolled up sleeves and loosened tie to signal the end of the day. And without warning, without so much as a word between them, he leans towards her. She feels his forearm tighten across her breasts, and her back is pressed against him. Each pearlescent button imprints a circle on her spine, and they sit still, clamped together in the half-light, listening to the boat's diesel engine, herring gulls shrieking and circling. They were lovers once and hardly speak of this, but here at sea, he is her Polaris, her true north.
That was such a lovely choice to go with the batting partnership poem, Anne. I really love the way that you chose two that spoke to each other in that way.
Thank you.
A great poem from a really great collection. So thank you for coming and sharing this evening with me. I much appreciate it.
Cheers, Maggie. You're wonderful.
Oh, bless you. I'm now going to read a poem which is sort of about the year that we've had, before I introduce Jacqueline Saphra, who is going to tell us a bit more about the year that we've had. And this is a poem on page 39 called The Repair Shop. If there is anyone here who has not watched The Repair Shop on BBC, then you have missed the great treat of the pandemic. And hopefully this poem will tell you why. the repair shop. All our locked down days, they strolled up the familiar path, pilgrims cradling broken offerings, harmonium, rocking horse, steam engine, vase, laying them carefully on the altar of the priests and priestesses with the power to touch the chipped, the stopped, the stained, the shattered, to return them to the untarnished wholeness of the past, its scarlet and gold, purple and greenwood, its smooth wheeled motion, music box chimes and peals, wafts of coal tar soap, pipe tobacco, lavender-scented aunts, winding back the clockwork of the generations with painstaking, nimble-fingered magic. And we, the hungry-eyed, watch for a sign that our splintered world could be restored by someone with the skill and patience, the paint, glue, solder, or stitch to repair time, to return us to the days before the age of touch slammed shut in our astonished faces. You'll see why I chose that to read to you before introducing Jacqueline Saphra. Jackie, where are you? Can you give a wave? Thank you. You need to say something as well. You need to unmute yourself and say hello so that you appear.
Hello, hello.
Thank you. Jackie describes herself as a poet, agitator, teacher, organizer, and word enthusiast. She was the amazing person who came up with the idea of a poemathon to raise money. She led a group of us to on a march welcoming refugees to London. She has more recently founded the Poets for the Planet. She is concerned about all the things that I'm concerned about, but has the imagination to figure out what to do about it before I do. I just follow in her footsteps. As if that wasn't enough, she is a tremendously gifted poet and an amazing craftswoman. She's been shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot, which, if anybody here is not a poetry person, that's the Oscars of poetry. And it's a fitting accolade for the kind of work that she produces. During the pandemic, she has produced not one, but 2 books. This gorgeous little thing, which is about Artemisia Gentileschi, with pictures from it. So you can find that and purchase a copy of that. And she has also produced, she started this thing, I could no more do this than fly to the moon. On the first day of lockdown, she decided she would write a sonnet every day. Well, it would take me a month to write a sonnet. So go you, Jackie. And produce this extremely gorgeous book of 100 lockdown sonnets, which I've got one of the hardback editions, but it is now out in paperback, and I also heartily recommend that to you. Jacqueline, I'm going to hand over to you, and you're going to read one from my book with a piece of artwork that we will show at the end of it. And then you're going to read us one of your lockdown sonnets.
Thank you, Maggie. I think a lot of the things that you said about me, I could also say about you, but I won't do that. And as nobody has read what I wrote about your book on the back of it, I think I'm just going to have to do that. So what I said about Everlove is, here is a profound act of poetic, elegiac empathy, a love song to us all and to the earth we love, share and ravage. Formally versatile, musical, always precise, Maggie Butt offers us the long view, shining a light on history's legacy and our common humanity. This is a mature, devastating and ultimately redemptive work, engaging with the best and worst of the human condition in poems, both personal and universal. There's a lot packed into this very slim volume of poetry, and you could hear from the way that she was talking about the 3 sections that it traverses many areas. So when she sent me the manuscript, I wasn't far in before I felt a kind of accumulated grief. And quite early on, I found myself weeping tears of rage too, but also of empathy, because that is Maggie's great gift, I think, besides her formal virtuosity, which is not showy, so you could miss it if you didn't look. But to put herself in other people's shoes and to do that with great courage and conviction, even when it's difficult territory. I think I chose this particular poem because it feels a bit like a sonnet to me, and obviously I'm a big sonnet fan, but also because it's about mothers and motherhood and sacrifice. And I was quite shocked when I saw that image coming up on the film, on Mary Behrens' film, because I hadn't seen it before. So this is called Post, and it's on page 19. When food is scarce, love can be weighed by the growling stomach of the mother. If she is infectious, love's scale is measured by her resolve to never kiss or hug her child. In the Blitz, it was gauged as she buttoned his coat and named him with a brown label, shipped with gas mask and a cardboard suitcase to the unpredictable care of strangers. Now calculate love here, where the barbed wire fence is prized apart until a slot can be held wide enough to post a toddler through, gift wrapped in knitwear, addressed to the dreamed of place where the streets of his future are paved with peace. So even through the sort of devastation and sadness of this poem, we end up at this dreamed of place, which we know many didn't reach, but of course some do. And so there's always something redemptive going on in the poems, however grim they might appear. Because I read this poem, I thought I might choose one from my 100 sonnets that riffs off some of the themes in Maggie's poem. In this sonnet, I say the dead are with us always. And I think Maggie's book tells us that too. It gets us close up to what war can do to a world and how the innocent are its perpetual victims. So this is from the 8th of May, 2020. It's sonnet 47 in the sonnet marathon. And like most of the poems, it has a little epigraph this time from The Guardian. Solemnity and celebration as Britain pays VE Day tribute to war generation. So I was out on my walk, my innocent walk. I'd seen the bunting, but I was well surprised to hear the screech of airborne terror. History repeats, birdsong is split and shattered, obliteration of the day, the sound of Spitfires celebrating. Look up, first nothing, then the flying V loops overhead to scrawl its coloured vapour trails across the heavens. The neighbours sing with Vera, engines roar red, white and blue, the people wave their flags, drink pick-me-ups for victory. Horror hides behind a wall of noise, bolstered by cheering, scones and English tea. Only the silence matters. The dead are here always. Auschwitz, Stalingrad, Hiroshima. Thank you, Maggie, for inviting me to read at your beautiful launch with all these lovely people.
Thank you.
Congratulations for this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for reading my poem so beautifully and of course your own. It is a huge honour to, when you sent me what you'd written on the back, I just thought you were writing about somebody else and somebody else's book really, but I was overwhelmed really. So thank you so much and for being here tonight, Jacqueline. I'm going to read two final poems to bring us from the gloom into the third section of the book. And the first one is on page 49, and it's called Last Swim of the Season. I haven't been in the sea yet this year, but it's going to come soon. Last swim of the season. The freeze lick of waves ices my toes, insta-numbs, calves, thighs, stomach. So there's a minimum of a moment when I swing back to the beach, almost wade into the dry, suddenly warm air, back to you with your beer and newspaper. But it's high tide, still calm, soggy sunshine, and this might be the last because it's October. The earth has tilted on its axis, dark lapping at the ear. The leaves have felt it and shivered themselves golden and ruddy. So I swivel again, count to 3 and duck right under, gasping at shock, bob up, not dead, lower myself again, the water cold skimming my back and shoulders with each stroke that takes me further from changing my mind, telling me this is what it means to be alive, battling undertow current with nothing except my own muscle and will, drenched by loss but never submerged, sun on face, inhaling seaweed smell, salt zinging lips, every pore tingling, blinded by the brilliance of light frisking on water, out of my depth again, with the power in my body to choose to live, to do this over and over, shedding my desk-bound, clothes-trussed self, diving in until cold has woken every millimetre of skin, reminded me how it's meant to feel, to be alive, alone, alive, a part of everything. Sea self, sunlight self, swim self, part fish, part mermaid, part woman. And I'm going to do some thank yous, I think, and then read the last poem that I'm going to do. So I would like to thank all of you for coming and giving me your time. I would like to thank particularly my special guests, Jacqueline, Anne, Holly, and especially Mary for her inspiring work. I'd like to thank Dave behind the scenes for doing all the technical stuff for me. I'd like to thank Stephen and the London Magazine for the astonishing act of publishing my book. I'd like to thank the friends who've helped in the reading and editorial process of this book. You know who you are. And last of all, I'd like to thank my family. You may notice in this book, there are no poems apart from Batting Partnership about my dear family. They are the closest thing to me in the world, and in many ways, the only thing that matters. And yet I find myself unable to write poems about them. I wish I could do what Cheryl Moscovich can do and write lovely poems about my daughters, but they all come out really sentimental and dreadful. So my apologies to you all for not being here in my poems. You are in my heart instead. And I'd like to finish, as it is spring, and here we are in spring, with a poem on page 63. This is a sequence that I actually wrote one of these at each of the equinox, and I had to wait for the equinox to happen before I could see what I was going to write. But we'll finish tonight with the spring equinox, and then I think Stephen is going to say cheerio for us. So spring equinox, it creeps up on mossy shoes, but you're so tired of waking to dark and cold that you don't quite believe it'll ever come. Sure, the signs are false news sent to fool you into hope, even though they preen in their fancy that finery. Hey, look, we're primroses. Even when a wedding's worth of petal confetti flutters to your feet, and the swallows write spring in cursive calligraphy. Reality's still the bite of frost, the slip of ice, the murk of mornings, till the day you wake without alarm to sunshine lapping at your pillow, and your spirits lift to a sky so vast that larks are sucked into it, broadcasting height. And you rise like a bear from hibernation who pads to the cave mouth, heavy with sleep, and for 1 second forgets about hunger in the astonishment of light. Thank you.
Well, what a lovely reading! What a lovely set of readings. As I said before, most of you came in. I've been speaking since 8 o'clock this morning, and wading through undergraduate work, and often I look at, I think of reading, and I think, oh no, and but you know what? This it goes to remind me, even in this strange digital world we're cast into, that there's a redressing beauty and restoration in poetry. And I also feel like one of those forlorn fellas who stand in the rain on the Antiques Roadshow and have been spent the whole day looking at goat's knuckles, and then an old fellow turns up with a whole lot of Fabergé jewelry, and then you've got this kind of wonderful cabochon, a cloisonné and filigree of startling imagery and cadences that kind of dance. And so that's been wonderful. Maggie and Holly's poetry I know very well, obviously, but also Jacqueline and Anne, and also Mary's reading, fantastic, and just shows that but even via Zoom we can celebrate poetry. But let's all meet again when we can, face to face, and have another evening of great poetry. Thank you very
much for being here. It's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And friends.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Good evening.
Bye.
Lovely, Maggie.
Bye.
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 Maggie.
Maggie.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Maggie. Thanks so much.
I'm definitely going now. Bye.
Bye, Russell.
Bye.